Hello bookish family, welcome back to Coffee Over Apples. I'm going to try to do this book justice when I talk about it. My second 5-star read of 2024 is Human Acts by Han Kang.
I could change the world.
I take back everything that I said in my recent videos about being unsure if I'm remembering the feelings that Han Kang gave me correctly when I read The Vegetarian years ago. I need to reread The Vegetarian. Han Kang. Like, I'm getting emotional just thinking about the fact that I need to get this out of my system and tell you what this book is about. It is a historical fiction that is very uniquely done. And I just wouldn't, I'd be beside myself if I gave this anything less than 5 stars that it deserves. I read this as a buddy read with my friend Scylla, and this has been on my shelf for a long time. I don't think there's a way that I can tell you what this is about without spoilers. There's a particular sentence in here that I wanted to read to just kind of give a little bit of insight to statements that were made by their own leaders at this time to justify these actions. And it says, in autumn of 1979, when the democratic uprising in the southern cities of Busan and Masan were being suppressed, President Park Chung-hee's chief bodyguard, Cha Ji-chol, said to him, "The Cambodian government's killed another 2 million of theirs. There's nothing stopping us from doing the same." And this was why there was an uprising. This is why there was violence. And while the government sought to write the narrative post-massacre as something that wasn't that serious, these people would not allow their family's history to be silenced. There is a paragraph in here which I think speaks to how these characters and how these people maintained their sense of personhood and their relationship with their country, even though it was their military that was doing this to them. It says, "The one stage in the process that you couldn't quite get your head around was the singing of the national anthem, which took place at a brief, informal memorial service for the bereaved families after their dead had been formally placed in the coffins. It was also strange to see the taeguki, the national flag, being spread over each coffin and tied tightly in place. Why would you sing the national anthem for people who had been killed by soldiers? Why cover the coffin with a taeguki, as though it wasn't the nation itself that had murdered them?" And so this comes in the beginning, before we find each of these people acting in courage and acting in a sense of self-preservation in the positive connotation, to maintain that just because their government has committed these atrocities against them, that does not need to be the end-all be-all for their nation. The cycles of violence that are present here are so prominent. We have prisoners of war, we have SA, we have very egregious, big R, I'll post it here, we have harm to young people. We have torture. It's just so sad. I sobbed into my coffee one morning as I was reading this, because it was my morning read every day for like a week before I would go to work, because I needed to give this my full attention. And when I got to some points where I was just sobbing into my coffee cup because it was so sad. It's about breaking points. It's about people choosing to resist because they feel like there might be nothing left to give, that Life has already taken everything from them. And so why not risk it all? Man, this is going to be a hard one. This takes place, I think, over the course of a couple days, specifically about the Gwangju uprising, which happened in 1979, 1980. The author, Han Kang, was a child when they lived in Gwangju, and they were able to get out of that area because their family moved, I think, just prior to when the whole situation happened. But there was a fascist government in power, and war crimes were committed. Now, it was really about censorship, and a majority of the first few stories take place around the provincial courthouse and follow this young boy named Dong-ho. Dong-ho is the through line for all of the different chapters in here, because each chapter follows a different POV, a different character talking to us in first person. So first person isn't your jam. Again, I don't think that this is going to be for you. And I was a little taken aback by the first person at first, but I see it as so necessary to really push the idea that this is about choice and humanness and base humanity, defining what humanity is and making sure that the audience can kind of just remember that we are part of those choices in what we choose to do every day, what we choose to talk about, what we choose to read, what we choose to remember, and how we choose to go forth with that information. So in that way, I think it pulls us into the situation to kind of question our own humanity. But the author ultimately, about 10 years, I think, after the massacre, goes back to Gwangju to see what happened with their family house, meets the man who owns the property, and the house isn't there. But he says, my brother, who was Dong-ho, passed away in the uprising, and his mother is no longer with us, but his mother would want her to tell the tale. However, he can only give as much information as he can because he himself doesn't think that he can do the story justice, and it pains him to recall these memories. So he gives her permission to write the story and set the history right for his brother, who was in the civil militia. So in that way, it's based off of real people, and she does work with information that she was given by survivors and family members who may have been there on that particular day. But other POVs from people that are mentioned that are no longer with us at that time of writing are fictionalized with permission from those who are surviving. So Dong-ho is about 15, maybe even less. They said he's in middle school, so maybe he's like 12 or 13 at the time, I'm not sure. He's with his friend, his best friend, and they're in a town square. I think the military is there. The military is armed tooth and nail. We find out at a certain point that the government purchased at least 2 bullets per person in the populace to prepare for this battle. So they bought something like 800,000 bullets. So in excess, that is evidence that this was a meditated war crime. And so Dong-ho feels a sense of guilt because his friend was killed, and when his friend was killed, he flees out of fear. And so he's standing in an alleyway trying to see if he can go save his friend or just get his body to lay him to rest properly. But as other people run out into the street, they're also killed. And eventually he gives up because he doesn't think that there's a way that he can save his friend, and runs away. So after he runs away, he goes to a place where the bodies are being taken to give a proper burial. And while his family thinks that he should be looking for his friend in the hospitals, he's not ready to admit that he knows his friend is dead because of the guilt of running away without his friend. And he's a child. He should not have to process that level of grief. And the second chapter is from the friend's POV, who is a ghost. And the beautiful thing that got me about the way that the ghosts are written here is that the ghosts don't have negative or positive connotation. They're not something to be fearful of, but they're just a presence who is attached to this earth because of their physical body. And through this, we are able to see a narrative in which the soldiers of the government are executing orders to get rid of bodies and get rid of evidence of their crimes. And so while we end chapter 1 with Dong-ho staying behind, even though he knows, according to martial law, that the military will be coming through that night and it's very dangerous, he stays behind to try to find his friend and promises his mother that he will be home shortly. We know he doesn't make it because the ghost feels his presence disappear. And that broke me so good. It was so painful. And then there was this other chapter where we follow a soldier, and the way that these soldiers are treated is absolutely disgusting. The torture that they go through, the harm specifically in another chapter to women when women are simultaneously fighting for their rights at this point. There is a scene where the women are on strike because they're getting paid 50% of what men are getting paid for the same kind of work, less benefits, if benefits at all, no respect on the job. And so they're on strike, they're weaponless, and the military comes, and the women say, if we get naked, these armed officers with vehicles, with batons, with riot shields, will no longer just be facing women who are workers. They'll be facing just women. And so if they look at us as women, maybe we can appeal to their masculinity and they won't want to hurt women because it will make them look bad. And instead, the extreme opposite happens. The worst violence that you can think of, some of the worst violence, because there is more, but just the violence that they commit against these women is like, it so traumatizing. And you feel for them, because in both the factory worker situation and the soldier situation, at the end of it, it ends with them being courageous, even though the government stripped them of their humanity. They hung on to hope and continued to fight. So the women created a women's coalition to support each other, and even through the years after everything settled down, continued to protest and have scenes in which people would not be allowed to forget. The soldiers, with nothing left after being threatened that they would be shot in their seats in the courthouse in front of the judge, while they were bowing to the judge, the youngest member begins to sing the national anthem, and everyone then begins to sing the national anthem. And in those moments, I was holding my breath. I was thinking to myself, please, no more, like no more pain for them. Especially, I think, in the chapter about the editor, the young girl, who I believe was Dong-ho's best friend's sister, if I'm not mistaken. She was also connected in some way. And she was a playwright, screenwriter, who had to submit her script to the Census Bureau. And they crossed out a bunch of things that they didn't want her to say. And in defiance, she kept it in the script, but technically it wasn't spoken. The actors mouthed the script saying, you can censor us and we'll play by your rules, but we will still get our words across to those who will listen. And it's just these incredible acts of courage that really make us think about what humanity is and how we always seek to maintain a sense of it, whether that be using the control and power that one has for something positive or negative. And I mean, if you're here till this point and that doesn't get you to want to read this book, I don't know. But if you have read this or you plan on reading it, please let me know. I post videos whenever I feel like it. Thanks for watching. Bye.
On we go.